Picture a lone widow, known for nothing more than running a humble boarding house, suddenly standing off against a band of ruthless outlaws. In one explosive moment, she reveals lightning-fast gun skills no one imagined she possessed. All it takes is a flick of her wrist and, in a heartbeat, the gang realizes they've provoked the deadliest shot this side of the frontier. Could this quiet caretaker truly be the infamous sharpshooter who once roamed untamed lands? And if so, will she embrace her old ways or forge a new path to protect her adopted home? If you're hungry for a tale of high-stakes standoffs, hidden identities, and a woman reclaiming her fierce legacy, then settle in. This story promises every ounce of grit and heart you crave. Subscribe to our channel now and turn on the notifications. You don't want to miss how this lethal dance concludes and what it means for a town caught between fear and a hidden legend finally unleashed. In the sun-scorched frontier town of Abilene Wells, a single gunshot woke the rising dawn. Three figures sprawled on the dusty main road, their lifeblood staining the earth. Over them stood Adelia Sloan Basukinaon, known to the townsfolk simply as the widow who managed the local boarding house. Her russet hair captured the early sun's rays like a warning flame, and her sharp gaze spoke of past battles fought and not forgotten. Yet few people realized the quiet power coiled within this unassuming woman. Most considered her a gentle caretaker, someone who rose at first light to knead bread dough, mend linens, and offer a polite smile to passing strangers. Once Adelia had arrived in Abilene Wells with only a small trunk and deeper scars than any bullet could leave. She was dressed in black, mourning her husband, Everett Sloan, a dreamer who believed in building a life beyond gunfighting. To outsiders, she was a tragic figure, an Eastern-bred widow stranded in a lawless region. But the hush in her eyes, the poise in her step, and the steady way she surveyed every alley and rooftop hinted at a prelude to a more violent history. Only a handful of people ever guessed the truth, that she carried a lethal skill set honed in the roughest corners of the West. As the older townsfolk told it, the biggest predators in Abilene Wells were not the bandits or drifters, but the lonesome widow who ran a boarding house on 3rd Street. Yet nobody believed such rumors, not fully, until the infamous Lawson brothers rode in. They came from the South, trailing a reputation for cruelty across 3 territories. That morning, Adelia stood on her porch, dusting off the barrel planters where she grew simple kitchen herbs. In the distance, the young teacher escorted students to the one-room schoolhouse. The blacksmith hammered at molten iron, and the sheriff patrolled the outskirts. Another day, in another half-wild frontier settlement. But the wind changed direction around noon, bearing the scent of something ominous. It was Dr. Bridget Hayes, a capable physician with ink-dark hair streaked by silver, who first noted the arrival of 4 men on horseback. She was speaking quietly with Adelia, sharing mild gossip about the newly married couple at the inn. Then they saw 4 silhouettes cresting the ridge, Clyde Lawson leading the group with the confidence of a wolf alpha, Myron following at a slight distance, Otis scanning with predatory eyes, and Sawyer Townsend, their hired gun, his posture controlled and menacing. Even from afar, Adelia recognized the typical hallmarks of men who relish brutality: loose-limbed arrogance, hands never far from their holsters. "More travelers," Dr. Hayes murmured, unsettled. "Doesn't feel like the usual passing trade." "No," Adelia replied softly. Her hands paused in the act of wiping flour from her apron. Something in the rider's approach brought forth memories she'd entombed long ago. The easy set of their shoulders, the way they spread out to watch the entire street, hallmarks of those who turned towns into their own playground of fear. That was the day the Lawson brothers decided to make Abilene Wells their nest. No random criminals, these men specialized in extortion. They usually began small, terrorizing a few people to demonstrate the local law's inadequacy, then demanding protection fees from every shop, ranch, and family. Over the coming hours, every door and window in Abilene Wells shut tight, shutters barred, not for bandits passing through, but for a menace that planned to dig in. Adelia closed her eyes, recalling a distant firefight from years earlier, her husband's calm voice urging her to leave that life behind. She had tried, oh, how she tried, choosing a gentler existence, baking bread, pouring coffee, serving as caretaker to paying guests. Now, with the Lawson brothers in town, the peace she clung to threatened to shatter. But beneath her black skirts, Adelia felt the reassuring weight of a small derringer strapped to her thigh, a relic of the woman she'd once been. And for the first time in years, it stirred in warning. That afternoon, Sheriff Nolan crossed paths with the Lawson brothers near the saloon. A broad-shouldered man nearing 50, Nolan had served the region for decades, keeping the peace with a stalwart sense of justice. When he greeted the four newcomers, they eyed him with a predatory amusement. At a glance, Nolan sensed trouble. Clyde Lawson gave him a polite nod but never truly recognized his authority. Myron stood at the bar, mocking the locals, while Otis played cards with a bored expression that belied a keen watchfulness. Adelia witnessed their exchange from the boarding house window. She noticed how each Lawson positioned himself, ensuring full coverage of the saloon's interior. She also saw how Sawyer Townsend lingered near the entrance, meticulously checking vantage points. The group's synergy reminded her of old times, traveling with a band of bounty hunters before she met Everett. Her breath caught at the memory. She had promised herself never again to be that person who settled every conflict with bullets. But as Dr. Hayes had once told her, sometimes the only difference between redemption and relapse is the presence of a good man. Everett had been that man. Now that he was gone, was she truly safe from her old ways? The rest of Abilene Wells tried to continue as usual. Iris Caldwell, proprietor of Caldwell's General Store, pretended not to notice the men who loitered outside her shop, spitting tobacco onto her freshly swept walkway. Silas Chambers, who owned the local bank, watched with anxious eyes as two of the Lawson brothers sauntered near his building, tapping the glass with mocking little knocks. The day dragged on, the tension growing thicker than the desert heat. Meanwhile, Adelia served dinner to her remaining boarders, a traveling merchant, a shy older couple, and a local school teacher. Each of them wore worry like a second skin. The meal passed in subdued conversation, overshadowed by the knowledge that the Lawson brothers had staked a claim on the town. She saw it in the quiet hush of the dining room, in the way they avoided meeting each other's eyes. After the sun set, Adelia closed the boarding house shutters. Her usual nightly ritual, polishing doorknobs, wiping the banisters, felt heavier with the sense of a gathered storm. The glow of lanterns illuminated a single photograph on the mantel. Everett Sloan, smiling, an embodiment of gentle ideals. For years, she kept that photo to remind herself of the peaceful world he wanted her to embrace. Now, seeing his face, the question roared in her mind. What does peace mean when evil men arrive? She froze at the sound of raised voices from the street. Peering through a side window, she watched Otis Lawson harassing a local boy who sold firewood. The lad cowered as Otis laughed at kicking the boy's cart. A snarl rose in Adelia's throat, yet she held still, waiting for some authority to intervene. None did. The boy fled, leaving his scattered firewood in the dirt. Otis picked up a log, heaving it at a store sign, then swaggered away. Adelia found Dr. Hayes waiting in her parlor, arms folded. They're testing boundaries, the doctor said softly. Seeing who they can intimidate. If no one pushes back, it escalates. Always does. Always, Adelia whispered. She remembered that pattern from other towns, other scoundrels, other bloodshed. In her old days, she would have pinned Otis to the ground with a bullet in his calf. But that was Ember Wynn, her old alias. That woman was a ghost she'd tried to bury. Throughout the night, hoofbeats sounded sporadically, the Lawson brothers roving to demonstrate their dominance. Adelia remained awake, perched by her second-story window with the derringer in hand. She half expected Otis or Myron to set her stable ablaze, or Sawyer to pick the lock to her house. But morning arrived with nothing burned except the townsfolk's nerves, frayed to near breaking. At dawn, Sheriff Nolan strolled by her porch, meeting her gaze with a question in his eyes. Could she help? Did she want to risk unveiling her old identity, the one that might keep the Lawson brothers at bay? She gave him the slightest nod, reluctant but resolved. She wouldn't watch Abilene Wells crumble. She had fled from violence once. This time, she might need to confront it head-on. When the Lawson brothers truly showed their hand, they did so over breakfast in Adelia's own boarding house dining room. Clyde led Myron and Otis inside while Sawyer Townsend lingered outside, scanning the street. They plopped down at a table, boots soiling her freshly laundered tablecloth, demanding coffee with a sneer. Adelia approached cautiously, ignoring the tension that crackled in the air. In the corner, Dr. Hayes, who occasionally took her morning tea at the boarding house, sensed trouble, tensing as she observed the visitor's posture. "Morning, Mrs. Sloane," Clyde said, leaning back with an air of false civility. "We hear you run the best lodging in town. We'll be needing rooms and some local insights. Times are tough, you know. A few men, newly arrived, might need a bit of reassurance." The threat carried plainly in his slow, deliberate words. Myron, brash and young, snickered. "Reassurance that nobody's messing with us, that the sheriff knows his place, that we can maybe handle that deputy who got big ideas." Adelia forced a polite smile, though her heart hammered. "We have vacancies," she replied quietly. "Provided you follow my house rules. No brandishing weapons, no disturbing other guests, and no—" "Or what?" Myron cut in, rising from his seat. "What exactly do you plan to do, widow? Run at us with a broom?" Dr. Hayes cleared her throat. "She asked you politely. Respect goes both ways." Clyde's lips curled in a predator's grin. "I apologize on my brother's behalf, Doctor. We mean no disrespect. Just that, times being what they are, it helps to have strong friends. A place like this, a widow living alone, could use some protection. Yes?" Adelia felt the weight of her derringer in her apron pocket, but she refrained from brandishing it. Instead, she channeled the calm she'd learned from Everett. "I manage quite well. Thank you for your concern." Otis glowered, pounding a fist on the table so hard the dishware rattled. "Folks around here do what they're told. We're not used to hearing no from anybody." Silence stretched in the dining room. A traveling merchant at another table hurriedly placed his coins and slipped away, wanting no part in what was brewing. Adelia maintained her even demeanor, though inside her old self, Ember Wynn, the sharpshooter, roiled, ready to snap at the slightest sign of real violence. When the tension broke, it did so with a single shot. Outside, a scream and a flash of gunfire carried through the open door. Dr. Hayes jumped up, medical bag in hand, but found Sawyer Townsend calmly stepping across the threshold, smoke curling from his revolver. "Some kid thought he'd get brave. Just a flesh wound," he drawled. "Deputy Arlen, that is. He can limp on home." Adelia's mouth went dry as she recognized the stark truth. The Lawson brothers were systematically dismantling the law in Abilene Wells, one intimidation at a time, breaking the deputy's resolve, terrorizing shop owners, gathering tribute, a methodical approach she'd seen in her old life, in towns that were devoured by well-organized outlaws. Clyde rose, pointing a gloved finger at Adelia. "We'll bring our things over tonight. Make sure the best rooms are empty. We'll pay, of course. But if you want us to keep trouble from your door, we'll expect a certain monthly arrangement." Adelia's chest tightened. She recalled another day, another gang making a similar proposition in a dusty hamlet. That time, she was on the outlaw's side, blind to the harm they inflicted, until Everett Sloane showed her how people suffered beneath cruelty. She'd left that life, changed her name, married Everett, and settled in Abilene Wells for a chance at redemption. Yet redemption seemed fleeting. The Lawson brothers left as abruptly as they came, sipping the stolen coffee, flinging a coin that landed on the floor by her foot with a mocking clink. Dr. Hayes exhaled shakily. "Are you all right, Adelia?" "I'm fine," she managed, ignoring the trembling in her hands. "But Arlen's shot. Let's go see if he needs help, Doctor." Hayes nodded, already moving. And so Adelia Sloane, the mild-mannered widow, stepped out into the street to find a wounded deputy in a shaken town. She saw fear etched into the faces of bystanders, farmhands, merchants, visitors, who realized the law had no real teeth. In that moment, she understood that her attempt to escape violence had only delayed the inevitable. In the West, cruelty found you eventually. The difference was whether you cowered or fought back. She helped Dr. Hayes tend to the deputy's wound. He stammered apologies that he wasn't quick enough on the draw. She said nothing, but inside a buried voice demanded she teach him how to be faster, how to anticipate. "Stop it," she told herself. "I'm just a widow now." But in the echo of her mind, the old name surfaced. Ember Wynn, the gunslinger who once ended threats before they took root. She swallowed that name again, forcing it down, even as her heart hammered with the knowledge that letting these men run free would ruin everything Everett and she had sought to build. The next morning, Adelia found a piece of paper pinned to the side of her boarding house with a dagger. "No payment, no peace, the Lawsons." She yanked it free, waiting the implied ultimatum with a tightening jaw. In the silent dawn, she walked out back, away from prying eyes, and retrieved a small trunk from her locked storage shed. Inside lay relics of her past: a worn gun belt, a .45 revolver, a faded set of riding leathers. The belt still carried an etched name: Ember Wynn. That person had killed more than she cared to count, living under the twisted code of a notorious posse. She closed her eyes, recalling Everett's gentle persuasion when she confessed her past. He believed in her potential for good. He believed love could break the cycle of violence. For 3 years, she'd embraced that dream. Yet the dream was now threatened by the Lawson brothers, who recognized only brutality. She stared at the trunk, torn between loyalty to Everett's vision and the painful awareness that men like Clyde Lawson required a certain brand of final justice. A knock interrupted her reverie. Dr. Hayes, out of breath, brought urgent news. The Lawson brothers had robbed Silas Chambers' bank at dawn, fracturing the safe after forcing him to reveal the combination. Silas was alive, battered, but his employees were traumatized. The outlaws made off with a stash of currency, then posted a demand around town: pay them a monthly tax or suffer. Adelia listened with a calm that disconcerted her. Hayes, "We've got no real gunslingers here," the doctor lamented. "Deputy Arlen is still recovering. Sheriff Nolan's good, but not enough to handle 4 lethal men plus their hired guns. We need help from outside, or I don't know." Adelia turned back to the trunk, inhaling. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the help you need is right here, waiting, even if it wears a widow's dress." Dr. Hayes' eyes widened as she realized the significance of Adelia's statement. She had suspected a deeper story behind Adelia's composure, but not this. "Are you sure, Adelia? If you take up that life again—" "I left it once," she replied. "Maybe I can leave it again when this is done. But right now, Abilene Wells needs someone who knows how to fight predators on their own terms." She unlatched the trunk, lifting out the gun belt. The aged leather bore countless scuffs, evidence of battles survived. Her breath caught in memory. A swirl of dust, a ring of blazing guns, and the terrified faces of innocents. Once upon a time, she was the fearsome one. Could she use that old persona in service of something better now? As she strapped on the belt, it felt alarmingly right, as though her body had yearned for this familiar weight. Dr. Hayes' voice trembled with a mix of awe and worry. "We'll stand with you, you know. The townsfolk, many are tired of living in fear." "I appreciate that," Adelia said, "but I'll do what must be done with or without them. The Lawson brothers wanted me to pay them for protection. Let's show them the cost of threatening my town." That afternoon, she visited each business along Main Street. Inside Caldwell's general store, she found Iris Caldwell fuming over wrecked shelves. Iris looked up, tear-stained but resolute. "They came last night, took what they wanted, laughed as they left. They said I'd better pay next time or they'll burn the place." Adelia placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No more running. No more cowering. We fight, all of us." She repeated this message at Silas Chambers' bank, ensuring the employees that they had allies. Silas, still bruised, mustered a flicker of hope. "Sheriff Nolan can only do so much. You have a plan?" Adelia nodded. "We'll coordinate. Position watchers on rooftops. Prepare a system of signals. Then, when they strike again, they'll find a united front. But that alone might not be enough unless I handle the Lawson brothers personally." Around dusk, she cornered Sheriff Nolan behind the saloon. He wore the exhaustion of a man outgunned by criminals. "If you're planning to do something drastic," he said, "I won't stand in your way. But I can't officially condone vigilantism." "You won't need to," Adelia replied. "Just keep them busy for half a minute if they try a frontal assault. Meanwhile, I'll handle it from within." She paused, pained. "Everett wanted peace. This is the last thing I wanted. But if I don't act, Abilene Wells is as good as dead." Nolan touched his brim. "Then do what you must. Just don't lose yourself to it." The wind picked up, swirling dust along the strut. Adelia returned to her boarding house, ignoring the shutters she'd left open. She didn't bother feigning normalcy anymore. The trunk with her gear sat in the hallway, evidence of a final break from her widow facade. At the mantel, Everett's photograph seemed to watch her, silent. She picked it up, voice a bare whisper. "Forgive me," she said, "but I can't let them destroy what we built." Before the night was over, she'd cleaned and oiled her .45, refamiliarized herself with its heft. She pinned her hair back in a practical style, setting aside black morning attire for rugged riding clothes. Outside, the sky darkened to an inky velvet, stars flickering like watchful eyes. She knew the Lawson brothers were celebrating their victory, counting stolen money, plotting their next move. Perhaps they'd come after her soon, expect a quiet, trembling widow. Instead, they would meet Ember Wynn, the gunslinger who had once left an entire gang in the dust. The tension broke with terrifying swiftness the following afternoon. A cry from the southern edge of town announced that the Lawson brothers and a handful of their hired guns rode in at speed, hooves pounding. At the same moment, Otis and Myron emerged from the saloon, stepping into the street. The synchronization told Adelia that Clyde had arranged a pincer, men sweeping from both ends to corner the minimal law enforcement. Standing on her porch, Adelia scanned the scene with her gunfighter's eye. She spotted Sawyer Townsend near the smithy, already taking vantage on a second-story roof. Myron advanced from the hotel side, a cocky sneer on his lips. By the livery stable, a pair of new gun hands flanked Clyde. Meanwhile, Otis motioned for a group to circle behind the bank. The entire maneuver was as coordinated as a frontier cavalry charge. Sheriff Nolan rushed into the street, hollering for calm. "Put down your weapons, all of you! We can talk this out!" His words fell on deaf ears. Gunshots rang out from the outskirts, where Deputy Arlen and a few volunteers tried to block the southern approach. Two of those volunteers fell, wounded. Adelia swallowed the adrenaline surge. She had prepared for this. Over the last couple of days, she'd quietly orchestrated a plan. Caldwell's store had been rearranged so that the aisles formed barricades. Silas Chambers' bank stationed watchers at the windows. Atop the boarding house roof, Reporter Hayes set up a vantage point to treat the injured or provide covering fire if needed. And lurking in certain alleyways, a few townsfolk with rifles waited for signals. But there was a hole in the plan. The majority of these people were novices, farmers, and shopkeepers unaccustomed to live combat. They'd rely on Adelia to handle the deadliest threats. She took a breath, stepping off her porch. This time, she didn't hide her gun belt. The .45 hung at her hip, the worn handle reflecting the midday sun. Passers-by gave her a wide berth, seeing the transformation in her stance. Clyde Lawson spurred his horse forward, stopping short of the saloon. He spotted Adelia in the open street, an amused snarl twisting his mouth. "Well, Widow Sloan," he called, voice carrying across the dust-laden air. "Heard rumors you've been stirring up defiance. People here think they can fight back, that you'll protect them." She didn't flinch. "They're not alone. I stand with them." Otis snorted. "What's a single woman with a gun going to do against us?" "Ask around," Adelia replied coldly. "Folks used to call me Ember Wynn. Maybe you've heard that name." She let the words hang. The effect was immediate. Myron hesitated, eyes widening. Possibly he recognized the moniker from saloon stories of the fearsome female sharpshooter who once rode with some of the West's deadliest. "No matter," Clyde growled. "Times change. Doesn't matter who you used to be. There's half a dozen of us, plus more men paid to help. We can blow this place off the map. So do yourself a favor. Stand aside, lady." She parted her lips in a feral half-smile. The old me might have agreed. The new me? She's not so eager to let bullies ruin everything. In answer, Sawyer Townsend fired a shot from his rooftop perch. The bullet skimmed the dirt at Adelia's feet. A challenge, Vero. She dove behind a water trough, returning fire. Her bullet clipped Sawyer's vantage point, forcing him to duck. Meanwhile, Myron rushed to flank her, only to be repelled by Iris Caldwell's sudden rifle shot from the store window. Gasps of awe sounded among the townsfolk as the mild storekeeper reloaded with surprising calm. Chaos enveloped Main Street. The plan had begun. Adelia grimly recognized they had to neutralize the key threats: Clyde, Sawyer, and any professional guns. A swirl of dust kicked up from the horse hooves. She heard scattered shots from the south as Arlen's volunteers held the second wave at bay. That wouldn't last long. She pivoted, letting out two shots at Otis, who was trying to corner a group of townsfolk behind a wagon. Her first bullet hit the wagon wheel. The second found Otis's thigh. He dropped with a bellow, cursing. Another volunteer, likely a novice, finished the job by pinning him under a pitchfork. Otis's guns scattered into the dirt. Sawyer Townsend tried repositioning for a better angle, but Adelia darted across the open space, sliding behind a crate near the blacksmith's. She squeezed off a single shot at Sawyer's shoulder, missing by an inch. He returned fire, forcing her to cover. "You're good," he shouted, voice echoing. "But can you outlast all of us?" Adelia clenched her teeth. The entire street had become a battlefield, townsfolk popping up from behind barrels, the Lawson brothers weaving on horseback or foot. Clyde barked commands, his men responding with some discipline. The standstill threatened to turn into a slaughter if someone didn't break it soon. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Myron dashing along the boardwalk, aiming at an unsuspecting group. She leveled her .45, exhaling, and fired. The bullet grazed Myron's arm, spoiling his shot. He yelped, stumbling. But the outlaws were many, and the townspeople's inexperience began to show. Adelia needed to finalize her next move. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion rocked the south side. Under instructions from Adelia, Silas Chambers' clerk had sabotaged the old storage shed with a small charge, sending up a plume of debris, not meant to kill but to scatter. The concussion spooked the Lawson brothers' horses further. Calls of alarm rang out. Some outlaws peeled off to investigate. Adelia used the moment to sprint across the open, heading for Clyde's position. If she cut off the head of this snake, the body might collapse. She prayed the others could handle Sawyer and Myron. By the time she reached the wagon Clyde used as partial cover, he had dismounted, spitting curses. Their eyes locked. He recognized the lethal intent in her gaze, and she saw his raw hatred. "Ember Wynn," he said, practically hissing. "I'll kill you for messing with my plans." She pointed her revolver. "You should have passed this town, Shaban." A single breath, a single twitch of her finger. But Clyde was faster than she'd anticipated, diving sideways, returning fire. The bullet burned across her sleeve, a near miss. They circled each other among the swirling dust and rising chaos. Her heart hammered, for a moment recalling how she once fought to free a helpless settlement from a corrupt marshal. Everett had been there, telling her there was another way. This time, she didn't hesitate. The next shot tore the pistol from Clyde's grip. He howled in frustration, falling to his knees. She advanced, pressing the barrel to his chest. "Enough," she growled. "Call off your men." He glared, refusing. "They won't stop for me." A twisted grin, blood on his lip. "We're unstoppable. The West belongs to men like us." In that moment, Adelia almost pulled the trigger. Ember Wynn's old rage demanded it. But she heard Everett's voice in her mind. "You can protect without destroying." She hammered the butt of her gun into Clyde's temple, knocking him unconscious. Then she turned to see if the rest of the outlaws realized their leader was down. With Clyde incapacitated, a ripple of confusion swept through the outlaws. Their orchestrated attack unraveled. Myron, wounded in the arm, cursed and tried to rally Otis, who lay pinned under a pitchfork, but townsfolk closed in. Sawyer Townsend, the last real threat, assessed the situation from his vantage on the blacksmith's rooftop. He realized the tide had turned. The carefully staged intimidation campaign had devolved into scattered gunfights, and Abilene Wells wasn't the easy prey they expected. Adelia, panting, spotted Sawyer raising his rifle. She dropped low just as a bullet whizzed past her ear. She rolled behind a water trough, returning fire. This time, her bullet found its mark. Sawyer's upper arm. He clutched the wound, hissing. Yet he remained upright, locked in a standoff. With a professional's calm, he tried to reload single-handed, but lost precious seconds. In those seconds, the blacksmith and two others, farmhands armed with shotguns, stormed the building from behind. They cornered Sawyer near the roof exit. Left with no route to retreat, he dropped his weapon, glowering at Adelia below. "Smart choice," she called up. "This doesn't have to end in blood." Sawyer's eyes flicked from her to the blacksmith's shotgun leveled at him. "I had you pegged for more of a killer," he sneered. "Aren't you Ember Wynn, or are you going soft, widow?" She hesitated, remembering the carnage of her past, the tension of living as a merciless gun. Then she shook her head. "I'm done killing unless I have no choice. Surrender or we find out how strong my resolve is." He spat a final curse, then let the blacksmith and farmhands take him into custody. Across the street, Otis and Myron had also been subdued. Myron whined about his bullet graze, demanding a doctor. Otis lay curled up, moaning. Adelia's gaze swept for Clyde, ensuring he still lay unconscious. In the hush that followed, the townsfolk realized they had done it. They had faced down a band of outlaws and won. Sheriff Nolan emerged from behind the general store, limping slightly. We got the rest outside town. Some hired thugs fled, but we can track them later. Good job, folks. The crowd erupted in relief. Some cheers, some laughter, many slumps of exhausted bodies. Iris Caldwell, rifle still clutched, approached Adelia. You were right, she said breathlessly. We can stand together. Adelia nodded, swallowing emotion. This victory belonged not just to her, but to everyone who overcame fear. Dr. Hayes hurried around with her medical bag, triaging wounds. The wounded, both ally and foe, would be treated. That was the new code here. Protecting life unless forced otherwise. One by one, townspeople converged near the center of Main Street, surrounding the captured Lawson brothers. Clyde roused, blinking groggily. He stared in disbelief at a crowd of ordinary shopkeepers, ranchers, and even the local teacher. All armed, all outraged, all standing behind Adelia. In that moment, his bravado bled away. One day, he muttered, voice hoarse, someone meaner will come. And then you'll regret not finishing us. Maybe, Adelia answered quietly, but not today. Today we showed that cruelty doesn't win unless good people do nothing. That's enough for me. Myron tried a final desperate angle, sneering at Adelia. You think you're any better than us? Everyone says you were a killer once, a real devil. You're just playing hero, but deep down, you like the violence. Her breath caught. Perhaps a younger Ember Wynn would have reveled in the kill. But the widow inside her now refused that. She pressed a gun barrel to Myron's chest and he froze. I used to be you, she said steadily, voice trembling with conviction. But I found something worth living for, not just killing for. Don't mistake mercy for weakness. He swallowed, avoiding her gaze. The tension broke when the blacksmith shoved him forward. Shut up, boy, you lost. In the aftermath, they bound the outlaws, preparing to escort them to the next county's courthouse. Some folks recommended just hanging them, frontier style. But Adelia intervened. No lynchings. This is a lawful settlement, remember? We'll do it the proper way. When the dust finally settled, the boarding house had bullet holes in a few windows. Caldwell's store was scattered with spent shells. Silas Chambers' bank had a smashed window, and the entire street reeked of gunpowder. Yet the sense of triumph overshadowed the damage. People realized they were no longer victims. They had dared to fight and succeeded. Adelia stood in the center of it all, trembling not from exhaustion but from the weight of relief. She spotted Dr. Hayes assisting the wounded, from Arlen's bandaged leg to a few minor scrapes on volunteer defenders. Meanwhile, Sheriff Nolan and a posse prepared to depart with the prisoners at first light, heading to the judge in the next county. The entire crowd parted for Adelia, giving her a wide circle of respect and gratitude. A hush fell. She realized they were looking at her, no longer just the widow, but the warrior who had guided them to victory. The teacher approached, removing his hat. Thank you, Mrs. Sloan. We never knew. She nodded, unsure how to respond. She glimpsed Everett's photo in her mind's eye, and for the first time, she felt certain he would understand her choice. 2 days later, the stagecoach bearing Clyde Lawson and his band departed for trial. Sheriff Nolan led the escort, ensuring no last-minute jailbreak. As the dust cloud faded along the horizon, Abilene Wells breathed easier. Shopkeepers reopened with renewed vigor, and an unspoken pride pervaded the dusty streets. People greeted each other with an emboldened sense of community. Adelia spent the morning helping Dr. Hayes tend to the remnants of the confrontation. They cleaned up broken furniture at the saloon, patched bullet holes in the boarding house walls. Otis's paint was still visible from where he tried scrawling threats, but the townsfolk scrubbed it away, leaving no sign of the Lawson brand. The tension that once bound everyone in fear had transmuted into a shared confidence. By noon, Adelia took a break, stepping into the hush of her boarding house parlor. Everett's photograph, having survived the chaos, sat on the mantel. She brushed dust from its frame, recalling the night she'd first told him about her violent past. He had held her hand, saying, "No one is just one thing. We all carry both shadows and light." She turned to find Dr. Hayes at the doorway, brow furrowed in worry. "You've hardly slept since the battle," the doctor said. "Now that it's over, maybe you can rest." Adelia exhaled. "I will, but something nags me. The outlaws are gone, yes, but this town is still raw. People discovered a new side of me, Some revere it, some fear it. I need to be sure we remain a community bound by trust, not suspicion. The doctor nodded. They look to you for leadership now, Adelia. Like it or not, you became the symbol of standing up to tyranny. Stepping outside, they observed the townspeople going about repairs. Iris Caldwell was painting a new store sign, Caldwell and Community, open to all. Silas Chambers hammered boards over a broken windowsill, while a pair of teenage boys carried rubble to a wagon. Even Deputy Arlen, his leg bandaged, tried resuming some patrols. Adelia watched with cautious pride. They don't need a gunslinger to rule them. They need each other. That's what you gave them, Dr. Hayes remarked. Permission to unify. You can't vanish now. Adelia crossed her arms. I never planned to vanish. I love this place, these people more than I realized. But I also can't be the unstoppable gunfighter they imagine. I'm just one woman with scars inside and out. When the midday sun reached its peak, the townsfolk gathered for a communal meal in front of Caldwell's store, an impromptu celebration of their deliverance. Adelia accepted an invitation to speak, standing near a makeshift podium. Her new .45 remained strapped at her hip, but her voice held the warmth of someone more used to kneading dough than delivering speeches. She scanned the crowd, some faces still bruised or bandaged from the conflict, but all shining with a sense of renewal. She cleared her throat. I want to thank each of you, not because I did anything special, but because we stood together when danger came. That's how Abilene Wells survived, not because of a single gun, but because of unity. Pearl Caldwell spoke up. But you taught us how to handle ourselves. Silas Chambers added, you gave us the push we needed. Adelia offered a faint smile. I did what I had to. This place was worth fighting for, even if it meant returning to old skills I once swore off. She paused, letting them see the vulnerability behind her eyes. I worried it meant becoming a monster again, a killer. But I realized I can be more than one thing. I can defend without losing the part of me that loves building, planting, caring. That's something each of us can learn. We can be strong without discarding compassion. The modest applause that followed comforted her. She glimpsed Everett's photograph in her mind again, imagining his approving nod. The hush parted as Dr. Hayes stepped forward. You heard her, folks. We'll keep bridging the gap. The store, the bank, the boarding house, none exist in isolation. We stand or fall together. A sense of solidarity followed, like a soft wind over a scorched field. They ate together, shared stories of the battle, recounted how the Lawson brothers were marched off in shackles. Iris Caldwell described how she overcame her trembling to fire that rifle, tears brimming at the memory. A rancher admitted he never thought he'd fight side by side with a teacher. Laughter and tears mingled. In that communal moment, Adelia felt the widow's empathy and the gunslinger's pride fuse into one cohesive identity. Adelia spent the next few days settling into her life anew, an existence where the sign reading Adelia's boarding house remained, yet under it a smaller plaque, guidance and defense. All are welcome. Word of the Lawson brothers' defeat spread quickly, carried by travelers, stage drivers, and telegraph wires. People from neighboring towns came curious about how a widow in black managed to orchestrate a victory over hardened criminals. Some sought her out, hoping to hire her as a personal guard. She refused politely, explaining that she had no desire to be a wandering gun for hire again. My place is here, she said. Others came seeking training in self-defense. Shopkeepers, farmhands, even widows from other hamlets, tired of living in fear. She recognized a pattern. The frontier was filled with vulnerable souls who needed only a spark to realize their own power. With Sheriff Nolan's blessing, Adelia formed a weekly practice session behind the stables. She taught everything from basic shooting posture to reading an adversary's stance. One day, Dr. Hayes found her setting up targets. They'll call you some name again, the doctor teased, like Widow Gunslinger. Adelia shrugged. Let them. I've accepted that part of me. As long as it's in service of something Everett and I believed in, people helping each other, I can live with it. During a quiet moment, she and Dr. Hayes went to see Deputy Arlen, whose leg was mending. He regarded her with grateful eyes. Without you, Miss Sloan, I'd probably be 6 feet under. She shook her head. You gave your best. Next time we make sure you're better equipped. More than that, the whole community will watch each other's backs. In the hush of those hours, she felt a fullness in her heart she hadn't known since Everett's death. Not the naive hope of erasing the killer inside her, but a balanced confidence in melding the caretaker and the warrior. She found she could stand at the stove in the morning, kneading dough, and at dusk help a rancher tweak his rifle grip, both roles essential. Some townsfolk embraced it wholeheartedly, seeing her as a living testament that one can redeem a violent past for a noble cause. A few looked askance, unsure if they wanted a gunslinging landlady in their midst. She didn't fault their caution. Amid these changes, rumors floated that the Lawson brothers might not remain locked up forever. Money and connections could twist justice. Otis, Myron, and Sawyer had pledged retribution. On hearing these whispers, Adelia felt no fear, only readiness. "They know me now," she told Silas Chambers in passing. "They know we stand together. If they return, they'll find we're stronger than before." That strength manifested daily. Iris Caldwell expanded her store to stock a modest selection of firearms, ensuring residents could purchase them legally and train with Adelia if they chose. Silas refined the bank's security measures, installing reinforcements and a more elaborate alarm system. Even the traveling teacher who boarded at Adelia's place decided to incorporate lessons on civic duty and communal defense into his curriculum. At times, Adelia found herself gazing at the mantle photo of Everett, wondering what he'd think. She liked to imagine he'd approve wholeheartedly, seeing his widow forging unity with her neighbors. The scars of her past still woke her in the small hours, but the nightmares carried less bite now. She was neither the ruthless Ember Wynn nor the docile widow with hidden sadness. She was the synergy of both, forging something new. 6 months after the showdown, Abilene Wells thrived in ways no one predicted. The orchard on the outskirts flourished with new plantings, an effort by the community to feed themselves sustainably. A small library took shape in the old building where the Lawson brothers once lounged. Children ran freely, Deputy Arlen strolled with a renewed confidence, and once a week Adelia's shooting lessons drew a small crowd behind the stable. Yet one late afternoon, a hush spread through the town when a lone figure rode in from the west. The rider wore a battered hat, face lined by dust. As he dismounted, the watchers recognized Jonas Helms, an aging gunslinger who once rode with Sawyer Townsend. He carried a simple note and a message. The Lawson brothers had escaped custody. They were rumored to be gathering men for another shot at Abilene Wells, determined to punish the town that humiliated them. Fear tried to creep back. But this time the townsfolk remembered they were no longer helpless. Sheriff Nolan called a meeting in the church. Dozens assembled, farmers, mothers, shopkeepers, laborers. Adelia sat near the front, once again wearing practical clothes rather than mourning black. She listened as Jonas Helms explained that Clyde Lawson had a new band, possibly bigger than before. If they came, it could be an army. Silence hung. Jonas concluded, "Some might say your best bet is to run. The Lawsons have a vendetta. They won't negotiate, only kill." "We're not leaving," said Otis Underwood, the blacksmith, echoing the sentiment that passed through the crowd. "This is our home." Murmurs of agreement rose. "We fought them off once," Iris Caldwell declared. "We'll do it again, with or without your help." Adelia spoke, voice firm. "We do not fear them, but we're not foolish either. If there's an army, we have to plan, prepare alliances." She glanced at Jonas. "You traveled with Sawyer Townsend's group once. Will you stand with us or watch from the sidelines?" He hesitated, lips twisting. "I never agreed with the brothers' brutality. I'm older, slower, and I don't relish blood. But I'll not stand idle while they butcher good folk. Count me in." She nodded, turning to the assembly. "We have time to fortify. We have lessons from last time. If the Lawsons come, they'll find a united front again. And this time we won't merely defend. We'll ensure they cannot return." A hush followed her words. She met each gaze. Dr. Hayes gave a subtle nod. Pearl Caldwell set her jaw. Silas Chambers tapped the floor with his cane. Determined, Sheriff Nolan rose. "We should send word to nearby settlements, maybe gather some reinforcements. But it's likely they all have their own troubles, so let's not count on cavalry arriving." People began to talk strategy. Jonas Helms offered insights on typical outlaw tactics. Adelia shared her knowledge of vantage points around the hills. Over the next days, they turned from a simple frontier community into a small fortress. The orchard area was fitted with hidden traps. Pits lined the narrower approaches. Skilled watchers took shifts on vantage ridges. This time, the entire region braced for what might be a real war. Amid the bustle, Adelia found a moment to reflect by Everett's photo again. She let her fingertips brush the frame. "We're on the brink once more," she whispered. "But the difference is we're not alone." She felt an odd calm, a sense that no matter what came, the entire population had discovered their capacity to stand. And she, bridging the old gunslinger within and the caretaker she'd become, was free. At dawn on the fifth day, dust billowed from the western road. Lawson's new army, at least a dozen men, forming a grim parade. Townsfolk gathered behind barricades, rifles ready. Children and non-combatants sheltered in sturdy cellars or the church basement. Tension crackled in the crisp air. Once again, Adelia stood in the street, but this time not alone. Sheriff Nolan flanked her, Jonas Helms at the other side, Deserter Hayes behind them. Ranged around were the armed volunteers, each assigned a station. The outlaws halted just beyond rifle range. Clyde Lawson, scowling from a scar Adelia gave him, stepped forward. "Abilene Wells," he boomed. "You didn't learn last time. We're here to finish the job." Behind him, an array of hardened faces, some old, some new. Sawyer Townsend was there, face set. Myron and Otis glared, hungry for revenge. Adelia advanced a few steps. "You found your freedom. You should have left us be." Myron bared his teeth. "Couldn't forget that bullet you put in my arm." Otis spat. "Or the humiliations. We owe you pain." Clyde smiled cold. "We demand the entire town's valuables. Then we raise it. Might let a few survive to spread the tale." The onlookers tensed. Dr. Hayes whispered, "We stand or die." Adelia nodded. Then she did something unexpected. She raised a small white cloth, a pseudo-flag, stepping forward. Clyde's brow furrowed. "Surrendering?" She shook her head. "A parley. Just you and me, Clyde. No horses, no guns. Let's talk 5 paces from each side." Clyde guffawed. "You think me a fool? I recall your cunning. If you trust your men to kill me the moment I cheat, you have no risk," she said. "Are you that scared you can't talk face to face?" He bristled at the provocation. "Fine." Waving at his men, he dismounted. Adelia handed her .45 to Jonas Helms, stepping forward. Clyde mirrored her, removing his revolver and tossing it to Myron. They closed the gap slowly, tension thick as choking dust. When they stopped at mid-distance, 5 yards from each side, it felt like the entire world paused. Adelia locked eyes with Clyde. "You gain nothing by attacking. We're better prepared than you think. Your men will die. You'll die. Why not walk away?" Clyde's lip curled. "Because men like me live on fear. And you took that from me once. I can't let you keep it." "Then let's settle it. You and me, no one else hurt." He threw back his head in a bark of laughter. "That's a fairy tale. If I kill you, the rest submit. If you kill me, they might scatter. But Sawyer and my brothers want blood. It won't end neatly." Her voice steadied. "It will. Because we're not who we were. We're stronger. You can't break us. The only question is how many die. Enough to satisfy your ego?" Behind Clyde, Myron grew impatient, twitching with the desire to shoot. Otis fidgeted. Sawyer observed calmly, waiting. On Adelia's side, Jonas and Nolan braced, uncertain if bullets would fly any second. Clyde's hand drifted near his belt out of reflex, forgetting he'd surrendered his gun. He cursed. "You're just stalling. Maybe your new friends are sneaking up behind us." Adelia spread her arms. "We need no tricks. We stand in plain sight." Silence reigned. Then Myron snapped. "Enough talk!" He hurled Clyde's pistol through the air. Clyde snatched it mid-flight. Adelia tensed, hands free, unarmed. A perfect storm of betrayal. Yet she didn't flinch. She'd predicted this. She dove to the ground as an explosion thundered from a carefully placed charge behind the outlaws. Horses whinnied, men spun to see the cause. In that heartbeat, Jonas and Nolan fired, pegging Sawyer and Otis. Myron yelled, returning fire wildly. Clyde pivoted, intending to put a bullet in Adelia. She rolled, grabbing a derringer from her boot, her backup weapon, unloading a single shot that sent Clyde's gun spinning. Grunting, he collapsed, pinned under Jonas's second bullet. The rest of the outlaws froze, caught in crossfire from the townspeople's vantage points. Otis and Myron, Each reeling from fresh wounds dropped their weapons. Sawyer, grazed by Nolan's shot, held a hand over his bleeding side. The line of hired guns saw they were outmatched, disorganized. It ended in seconds. The outlaws surrendered, raising hands in submission. Their bravado fizzled under the unrelenting aim of Adelia's defenders. She stood brushing dust from her clothes, Derringer smoking. Clyde sprawled in shock, resentment burning in his eyes. You tricked us again. No, she said, retrieving her .45 from Jonas's outstretched hand. We simply protected what's ours. I tried to talk. You forced our hand, remember that. In the hush, the townsfolk emerged from concealment. Farmers, store clerks, the teacher, all armed. Not one was a professional gunfighter, but each had resolved to defend their home. The outlaws saw a united front, unstoppable in its solidarity. For a second time, the Lawson brothers were undone, this time with no illusions of regaining power. Adelia stared at Clyde, chest rising and falling with the adrenaline. It's finished, no more terror. The West belongs to people who help each other, not monsters who prey on them. He spat blood, cursing. The West is savage. You just traded one kind of savagery for another. Not at all, she replied softly. We learned to stand together, to stand for something. Big difference. And then in front of everyone, she disarmed the final outlaws. This time, no illusions about them escaping. The entire community witnessed the final disarmament, saw them bound. No one cheered with bloodthirst. Instead, they exhaled relief, the tension that had ruled for weeks finally dissolving. Even Dr. Hayes, though prepared to treat wounds, found minimal casualties, only a few bullet grazes. Adelia guided Jonas Helms to gather the men for transport. She looked back at the townsfolk. Again, you showed we're more than victims. We're a real community. A few people nodded, remembering the last lesson, the last vow. She walked away from the battered outlaws, glancing at Everett's imagined presence. This time, she thought, the cycle of violence might truly be broken. Because Abilene Wells had discovered not only how to fight back, but how to stay strong once the immediate threat was gone. She too discovered that living in peace needn't mean discarding the warrior within. She could weld them together, forging a resilience that carried hope. From the moment she showed the outlaws her true firepower, this once overlooked widow has guided the town toward unity. Each neighbor, from the school teacher to the blacksmith, discovered that standing together bridges fear. In the end, it wasn't just about a single gunslinger's talent for lightning draws and dead center shots. It was about ordinary folks rising when everything they loved stood threatened, and winning, hand in hand. Looking back, I see how her hidden past and compassionate heart merged into a force no bandits could break. Instead of bringing ruin, her skills ignited hope, rebuilding a community stronger than before. Now we want you to weigh in. Which moment made you hold your breath? Did the final standoff surprise you? Leave a comment and let's keep the discussion going. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and remember, every quiet corner might hide a legend ready to defend what truly matters.